Hello, this is Malorian, this is the Orc Tactical Team, and what we're going to be talking about today is actually something that one of the viewers there asked. He said, Malorian, I know you've talked about Demons of Chaos before, but it was kind of more in general for 8th. Could you really go and focus in on the greater demons? Talking about what point levels should I be taking them, how should I be building them, and which one should I be taking for a competitive tournament? And so, this is a great question, and I think I'm going to be jumping to the one that I find is the aspect that's the most interesting, which is what point size should I be taking these guys? Because it's actually completely reversed from many other armies. Most other armies, when you're trying to think about should I be taking this big Vampire Lord, Orc War Boss, Ogre Tyrant, the smaller the game gets, there gets to a point where, well, man, too many of my points are into this one character. It's just not worth it. I should be getting in another unit at this size, and this can be helping me way more. We're not even talking about percentage limitations here. We're just talking about it just gets so small, and you think, well, man, if my generals mainly just give me leadership 9, why don't I just save this and put all these other points into something else that can be just as offensive? However, for demons, the reason why this is completely reversed is the fact that it's a big, greater demon, a large target flying around, and it can be hit with cannons, as opposed to those other things I said, which can be hiding in units. And so really, when you look at it from that way, the very best point size for using greater demons is the absolute smallest one where you can fit them in. Because at that point, you're going to be seeing the fewest war machines. There's going to be the fewest number of units out there for them to be going after, and they're going to be even smaller, so it'll be easier to get past steadfast. Also, there'll be a less chance that you'll be seeing those big elite units, like a big huge horde of white lions or black orcs or something like that. It should be something that should be a lot easier to take on. So really then, what's the opposite? What's too big for a greater demon? And that part I can't just say. I can't say this is the right number to take them out, but what you really need to do is look at your local meta. How many Empire, Dwarf, Skaven, Ogre players do I have? What type of armies do they like to take? It could be that, man, in my area, half the people take ogres. But you know what? They hate iron blasters. They just don't take them. Well, then fine. You can be taking them even up at 3,000 points. But really, I would actually say that in general, that would be my cutoff. Which is really weird, because back in 7th, I said exactly the opposite. When you get to these big points, yeah, you want to have a greater demon in there all the time. But now things have just changed. And I would just be saying that, by the point that you get to 3,000, I would highly be looking at it and saying maybe you should be really taking it out. 2250, you're probably good. 2,500, maybe that's the gray area where you really have to sit down and look to see what everybody else is taking to see if what's going to be happening there. Because, it's such a huge liability. These things are 500 points plus 100 points for a general. If these things get shot and knocked down, if you're in a competitive tournament, this guy could also be your only magic user, and if you really bomb one game because of a couple lucky cannons, where you could have been fighting for the top 5, boom, all of a sudden you're middle of the pack. So it's a huge liability and something you really have to think about, especially when you have other things you can be taking, like a big huge horde of bloodletters. Simple, done, go get them. Now, the next thing to be talking about is how do you really build them, which one's better than the others, and I think for this you kind of have to put it together, and I'll just kind of talk to them about my least favorite to my favorite in the way that they're really used. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Lord of Change. That's my least favorite of all of the greater demons. And the main reason here is that he doesn't really serve that big of a purpose in 8th. Sure, in 7th, his little magic missiles were pretty good. He was flying around. War machines weren't as accurate. He was pretty cool. He could go in there, and even though he was pretty weak, there's no steadfast, so he could really be breaking these combats. Well, things are different now. Even just the basic book lores are better. And so your little heralds of Tzinch that can be taking these other really good lores, like the lore of Shadow and stuff like that, why would you want to take this big flying chicken that's a huge liability when I could be just taking a couple of these cheaper heralds and they're completely safe? So, no matter which way you really build him, I don't really like him. If you do take him, you'd want to make him as survivable as possible, but he doesn't really have any survivable options. So in general, if you really like him and you want to kind of fly around, go ahead. But otherwise, yeah, I would really stay away from the Lord of Change in competitive 8th edition tournaments. The next one I'd be talking about probably is the Great Unclean One. And this is actually, even though I'm saying he's the second worst guy, I'm thinking there's a big, huge jump here. Now, he is pretty good because even though he's the slowest one out there, he has a lot of wounds. So when we're talking about liability, well, all of a sudden, if he has more wounds and should be eating, 3-4 cannons before he's probably going to die, well, all of a sudden, this is so much better. The other thing is that the meta has been changing to be seeing more monsters and stuff like that. So with the builds of his, where he has a big bale sword, which is going to be doing crazy damage and d6 wounds, I mean, that's really good for taking out these monsters. He also has a really good build. I mean, you just make him a level 1 wizard, take that signature spell, cast it. This guy's really tough to kill in combat. And he can just get in there and just stomp away units and destroy them. And because he's so tough, he can even be throwing up against some of the more offensive units that you don't want to see going after some of your other regular hordes and stuff. Or you can be just using him as something to throw in there and bog stuff down and cast magic. There's a couple of different builds you can go in there, but really, for the most part, you just want to keep him as a level 1 with that awesome sword, making sure you're wounding easy, and just go get him. Of course, you're going to need to have some other fast elements to try and hold things down and make sure that he can get to the right spot, because that's one of his big negatives, is because he's so slow. Usually the opponent can decide what's going to be matched up against him, but otherwise, he's probably the second worst, and that's why overall. He has survivability, however, he's really slow. Now, the next one I'd say that's the next best, so second best overall, is the Bloodthirster. Now, this guy is just crazy, right? No matter what way you build a Bloodthirster, even if you take him naked, this guy's a beast. You just throw him to a unit, he has so many attacks, of course he flies, he can be rushing bunkers, he'll be killing characters, and if you go into a unit, between all of his attacks and his thunder stomps and stuff, he's just going to be taking on units all by himself. And really, the two main things you really want to see when taking a Bloodthirster is, number one, the ability to re-roll all your hits. This is so important. I mean, if you have one bad series of rolls, you're in a lot of trouble. So make sure you have that. Of course, you want to have your good old armor on there. Make sure you get that armor save up so you're not going to be losing to little arrow shots and stuff. And another really critical thing to have is a whole thing where you ignore magic weapons. And that's because there are very few things that can beat a Bloodthirster in the game other than war machines, and they are heavily dependent usually on magic weapons. So if you just have it saying that all magical weapons against me count as mundane, that liability is gone. And another great thing is, because this guy is so offensive, you don't need to be trying to be very careful to pick your battles. It's not like the Great Unclean One or the Lord of Change. We have to be really careful about where you try and dedicate him. Just charge him into whatever unit for the most part. I mean, don't be stupid about it, but usually the best place he is in combat, so he can't be shot. His high weapon skill is keeping him pretty well defensible in there, because they have trouble even hitting him. And you just destroy these things, or if nothing else, hold them down so the rest of your troops can come in, and then just go from there. Or, if you really want to, you could go to a flank and threaten bunkers and stuff. But this guy is just an offensive beast. The only reason why I'd be putting him down is that, he can die. He doesn't have all that many wounds. If he gets hit by a cannon, he can be a bit of a trouble. If there's some units that are... That's why I'm saying this. You have to have some way of having magic, right? So he has no way of adding to the magic phase. So if you're up against other armies as well as trying to get against that can go and snipe out your other wizards that you're depending on, then all of a sudden that's Greater Demon that you put so many points in. I mean, you don't have the magic phase anymore. And let's say if you lose the whole magic war up against a Slan, and all of a sudden your Bloodthirster's going after Toughness 8 Temple Guard or whatever, it's not really the same thing, and he's going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's one thing you have to kind of worry about. Now, the number one Greater Demon I love then is the Keeper of Secrets, the Slanesh Demon. And man, you just take one option, and that's the Spirit Eater. So that whenever he does a wound, then he gets a wound back. And, he's really fast, he doesn't fly, but he's movement 10, and he can just smash him into a unit. He's still fairly offensive, he can be killing most characters, and the main thing is that he's going to be getting wounds back. He is almost impossible to kill if you don't kill him before combat, or if you have some really tough lord to take him on. Because this guy, I mean, you might go and do some wounds to him. I mean, he's going to go first because he's so fast. He might be killing your characters before they even get to go. At that point, he has nothing to heal unless he did some shooting. On your side, you might do a couple of wounds. He'll do Thunder Stomp. He should win combat or lose by not much and hold. And then next turn, he goes first again, heals himself up, and this keeps going until really that unit is dead. And so when we were looking at the number one negative to Greater Demons, which was the liability, well, this guy has the best counter for it. So he's fast, he is very stable, and the other thing is that he can also be a very effective level 4. Slaanesh magic is actually fairly good if you get the right combos going off, and he can be doing that right from inside at the very heart of your army. Just take him with that movement 10, rush him in, trap something down, and while you're killing stuff and healing your stuff, you're also casting all your magic as well. And I mean, sure, you could be looking at this, and man, if you're taking a level 4 Keeper of Secrets, Malorian, that's a lot of points. But this is a lot of points that your opponent is not going to get. This is a big chunk of point denial because he just cannot get this. And then meanwhile, but over the turn of the game, whatever he kills is going to be coming back to you, right? He's going to be zipping out there. He can jump. I'd throw him right into Savage Orc Biggins. Start chopping those things up. Hold it up until your reinforcements come in. You're just going to wipe out those Savage Orcs by that point because they're going to be so reduced. And then just keep on going through and breaking out the rest of the army. It's just a fantastic Greater Demon. So there you have it. I hope you like it. This is just a little summary again. You want to take Greater Demons in the smaller point size possible. Really look at your meta. Try and see how many war machines are out there because that's going to be your biggest threat. And then when it comes down to it, don't like Lord of Chains because you have heralds that do the magic thing better and aren't liability. Then I like the whole Great Unclean one because he's slow, but at least he's dependable. Bloodthirster is always a combat monster. And then the best thing is the Keeper of Secrets. So there you have it. If anybody else has anything else they want me to cover, just let me know. Thanks for watching. Bye.